Hi, I'm Jerry Matthews from the Bukwas crew. I'm sure that there are those of you who remember a time when the only place where you could find material on Bigfoot or Sasquatch was at your public library. But even then, the amount of such publications available were problematic. Then came progress, which brought the world into your living room in wonderful Technicolor. Please be kind and rewind. And then we were blessed again with the arrival of DVDs. Thank God they've won out over Laserdisc. But again, Sasquatch DVDs were a very niche market, catering to those who had mainly read the books from decades before. The real wealth of exposure came from the TV documentaries. YouTube brought us taped events like biographies, conventions, presentations, and yes, documentaries of all stripes. Now we are fortunate to have a bright young researcher come along and start preserving these videos online for his satisfaction and our pleasure. Coming in at number 4 in the Summer Sizzle podcast is a revisit to an earlier podcast with Todd Prescott. His website is a Sasquatch essential for everyone. It was a pleasure to talk to this researcher about his passions. Enjoy. Okay, hello there all. We have a good one for you today with none other than Todd Prescott, the video vault keeper of the Sasquatch Archives. I think you're going to enjoy this edition today. And well, let's get on with it, shall we? Okay, without any further ado, let's bring out the man of the hour himself, Mr. Todd Prescott. Hello, Todd. How are you today?
Awesome, Jerry. How you doing?
I am doing fine now that we finally got together to get this thing rolling. You know, myself and Todd have been, saber fighting for months to finally get a podcast on the go. And it pleases me no end to finally have him here today. Now I have my two out of three co-hosts, Mr. Leon from Bigfoot Okanagan.
Sasquatch.
You're in Sasquatch country now, boy.
Yeah, before Thomas comes on here and starts hashing me apart, putting in his Sasquatch Okanagan.
I expect him to hold his part.
Yeah.
Speaking of Thomas, hello, admirable Thomas.
Good evening, Jerry. Good evening, Todd. And Leon, change that name to Sasquatch.
It'll happen someday. But this is not Leon. Change the title of that website show. It is about the Sasquatch Archives. And Todd, tell me, how many videos does your channel contain at the moment?
Haha, that's a trick question because I'm not even sure. I know it's got to be close to 250. I don't know the count because I just keep uploading every couple of days and the number just keeps growing and growing and growing. But I think it's around close to 250. Definitely.
Well, that's good. Well, but because, with that attitude, it becomes a labor of love. If you're so busy doing it, you don't have time to sit back and reflect. I think that's pretty cool because a lot of people get hung up in the numbers. Numbers are everything,
Yeah.
I get hung up in the history, Todd. That's a great collection. And you put things up that even I was personally involved in 30 years ago that I never saw.
Well, that's awesome that I can do that. And that's the whole point is to, bring it to the masses and especially the people that are passionate about it. That gives me a great joy to know that there's stuff that has been lost seemingly and then refound. And as I always say, I have to give thanks to people like Thomas, because he was there for longer than I was, and he's helped me along the way in more ways than he actually knows. And just even behind me right now is one of his books, and I have all of them, of course. But people like John Green and Rene Dahinden, all those people have been instrumental in developing the Sasquatch Archives, whether they realize it or not. Of course, Rene had passed on long before I thought of the Sasquatch Archives. John Green was aware that I was collecting stuff, of course, and then other people like Larry Lund have been very kind. Gene Robinson, so many people, Jamie Wayne, Dustin Sievers, the list goes on. So I have to thank those people. And as I always say, I'm just a vessel. I just have the ability to put it out there, and I'm glad that people are enjoying it. And I could care less how many videos I have, as long as I keep the momentum going and bring as much as I can to the people who enjoy it.
For those of you who have never been to Todd's site, I'll just show this for you now. This is what it looks like. It's the Sasquatch Archives. And it has a multitude of videos. I mean, if I could start watching this, I'm sure I would be spending my entire winter just going from video to video. Bill, welcome aboard.
Thank you, and nice to meet you, Todd. I don't think we've ever crossed paths, and I have been looking forward to this.
It's great to meet you too, Bill. Awesome. Nice to see a name with a face with a name.
And I got to remember that one. That's pretty slick. And he wasn't kidding about the contributors either. Here's his contributor page. The print may be too small for you, but you'll recognize a lot of those names if you've been in the Sasquatch world for more than 2 years. And if you don't recognize them, well, then you better get out and do some research because you're missing out.
And Jerry, that's an incomplete list. I ran out of. YouTube has a limit. They have a limit of how many characters you can put in your about. So I could add another 20 names, but they won't allow me. So I'm going to have to maybe rotate those names or get rid of the verbiage above that, so I could fit in all the names. Because you saw Thomas's name is not there, and it should be. So my apologies, Thomas.
Oh no, you can be sure Thomas noticed it wasn't there.
Well, I saw him.
I expected to get a phone call. Put that list up again, will you?
It'll be added.
No, Thomas, your name isn't there.
It's not.
No, it's not.
No.
Well, the people that you see there actually have somehow gave me a video. Thomas, wink, wink. That's a hint to shoot a video, shoot something that no one's seen my way, and then you make the top 10.
No.
That's how it works. That's
Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Networking. Yeah.
Todd, how does the Eastern provinces rate report-wise as compared to the Western provinces?
Well, interestingly enough, we have a longer history of reported, documented sightings because the West was settled later. So if you go back into newspaper archives, you'll find a lot of historical accounts from the mid 1800s, which do predate what was going on in BC and Washington State. Of course, the native people or the Indigenous First Nations people of Canada and the U.S. and the West, I think that they probably have a richer history because it was more recognized compared to some of the Eastern First Nations people. But as far as today goes, it's pretty close. There's a lot of stuff going on in Ontario, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York State. Those are the three biggies right there, or four biggies. Did I do four? Yeah, I said four. Three U.S. states: Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Canada, Ontario. But Ontario obviously is not the only place. Quebec, although there's a language barrier there. If you don't speak French in some parts, you won't pick up on those reports. Yeah, it's pretty active.
Yeah.
BC gets the credit, for some reason it's got a rich Indigenous people's culture concerning it. I think that's the difference.
Well, doing these podcasts, you come to the realization that there are a lot more podcasts based in Eastern states and Eastern Canada. And everybody blinked out on me, but they're coming back. You can run, but you can't hide. And, there's a lot more states and provinces in Eastern Canada with podcasts than there are in California, Oregon, Washington, BC, Alaska. It seems like it's really caught on with the Easterners.
I think it's because we're more technically advanced in the East.
As proven by my screen just blinking out. Yeah.
Case in point, it froze.
And
that never happens in the East.
And the four seniors you have here we have our own pallet of care.
Well, I recall, I grew up in cottage and wilderness country in northern Ontario around Bancroft.
Yep.
And the only real Sasquatch, and I was looking into it back then, even before it came out here, and the only thing I ever found Sasquatch related that was relatively well known was, the old story of old yellow top around Cobalt.
Yep.
Yeah. So I came away thinking Sasquatch is basically a West Coast phenomenon. And they had all kinds of other things, though, whereas here on the West, it's basically Sasquatch. And of course, now we got all kinds of things, but it started off with Sasquatch. In the East, it was always that way. And then came the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek in 1972. And that seemed to spur a lot of interest in this subject in the eastern part of the continent. And suddenly people were looking in and coming out with reports and stories from all over the place.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that got me really interested in it was from the East. I mean, I got hooked on things like the Jersey Devil and the Mothman and everything that had nothing to do with Sasquatch whatsoever. But
like in Ontario, we're around Kirkland Lake in the Bancroft region, there was always a cryptid legend of a giant snake. Even my grandfather claimed to have taken a shot at it once. He knew George Irwin. He was not a man who made up stories. And my Uncle Beck said he sat on a log and he stuck his knife in the log and the log started to crawl away. And that was his story. But the way old Beck here in the alcohol, he told stories all the time. So and there was legends about these little creatures like, little dwarf-like things and things like that in and around the Kirkland Lake region. And that kind of thing just went on. Sasquatch was kind of like, until the late 60s, early 70s, Sasquatch was kind of thought of completely as a West Coast phenomenon, even in the East for the most part. And then people, all the stories from Falk, Arkansas started to come out and all that. And suddenly people were looking into things, and they said, hey, what's all this? It's here too. Yeah.
And you know, Thomas, that's absolutely correct that there's not a lot in the East as far as area goes, and the Cobalt Old Yellowtop is the most well-known sighting because it went over so many years, starting in I think 1906, and then in the 20s, and then into the 70s, and it seemed to be the same creature, same being, same subject, and multiple witnesses. But I don't know if you knew or not, but in the mid-60s, there was a rash of sightings down in the Niagara region, close to Smithville and whatnot, and interesting sightings. And again, multiple witnesses over many miles, many kilometers, and it was all within a couple weeks. But if you weren't reading those local newspapers in Beamsville or Smithville, you would never have heard of those things because they're such small communities, and it was only covered locally, as was the case back then with anything like that. It wouldn't make the national press by any means, especially not in little small town Ontario. So there was some stuff happening before 72 when the legend of Boggy Creek came out, but as you so poignantly said, it wasn't available to the masses, and it really wasn't in the public consumption in any way, shape, or form until, you know, mass hysteria came out with the legend of Boggy Creek.
If you weren't living in that little town reading their little paper, you never would have heard of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think you know, I lived born and raised back east, and I never heard of any of these creatures up until my late teens, and I was exposed to Sasquatch by Argosy magazine. They, of course, ran those clips from the PG film down the cover. And I thought, what the hell is that? And I sat down and read about it. I remember thinking, boy, I'm glad we don't have anything like that here. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago I came across Dale Hunter and Rene Dahinden's book, Sasquatch. And I read that, and like something clicked immediately. I mean, I sat down and I didn't put that book down till I finished it. And ever since then, that was it. I wanted to find out as much as I possibly could about this creature. And along the way, you're going to pick up stuff, you know, like the Mothman and the Jersey Devil and what have you. I mean, it all gets sucked in with the rest. But it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, that I could be so interested in it, and yet there was no recourse back then. I'm talking about back in the 60s. Who did you get in touch with on the East Coast that had interest in such things? You know, I mean, it was a bit of a wasteland as far as I was concerned. I mean, the 70s came along, and then you had Leonard Nimoy, and they did all these TV shows and everything. You know, the same way all of us got into it. It's pretty well the same story. And we were raised, and our imagination was raised watching these TV programs and what have you. And I think it just snowballed after that. More books were on the market about the subject and what have you, you know. But I mean, growing up, I don't know, as a teenager in my early 20s, information about Sasquatch was pretty slim pickings.
Where did you grow up, Jerry?
Newfoundland, St. John's.
Sorry to hear that.
Oh, you be careful, lad.
Actually, when I was growing up,
where's the button? Where's the button? Where's the ejector seat button? I got the upgrade to the next model of Streamworks to get that.
Right, God. Matter of fact, where I was growing up around Bancroft, Newfoundlanders were on the cryptozoological list. We had sightings, but half the people didn't believe it.
And you thought you were going to get an invite to Thanksgiving, didn't you? Oh boy, you screwed that pooch. Yeah.
How did
No, okay. Now getting away from the West Coast for a moment. Todd, tell me about your adventures in the West.
Okay, so my adventures in the West, it's every Sasquatch researcher's dream, I would think, to get to British Columbia because of all the historical context that's there. And I had read, like you had, Jerry, the Rene Dahinden Don Hunter book, and there was a lot of talk about BC. And of course, I'd read John Green's books, and a lot of it focuses on British Columbia. And even Roger Patterson's book delves into stuff in British Columbia, and Ivan Sanderson's stuff. So it was just the Mecca, the place to go. And I'd always wanted to get out there, and the opportunity presented itself in 1995 when some people that I went to college with, music college, had a need for a drummer. They were playing in a band, traveling out there, so they called me up and said, "Hey, you want to join our band?" And I said, "What time do you need me to be there? Because I'm in my car right now, heading west." So 95, I got there, and I started living my dream. I was playing in a band, which is something I love to do, getting paid for it, traveling around the entire province, north to south, over to the island. So as you know, bands play at night. They perform at night, usually 10 o'clock till 1 or 2 o'clock, depending. And I would wake up early in the morning and go out researching. And Thomas would know some of the spots I went to. Terrace was one spot, Prince George, on the island, Campbell River, Port Hardy. Nanaimo's not really a hot spot. It's a tourist spot. And then all through the Okanagan Valley, of course, Harrison Hot Springs, Agassiz, Hope, Yale. I went all over the province. And then there's days that we weren't working, I would drive out to explore. So it was a dream come true. So I was there for a little over a year, and the band disbanded because the singer had married the guitar player, which is always a mistake. Don't do it. And so the band fell apart, and my then girlfriend's mother got sick with cancer, and she was back in Ontario. So we had to pack up and head back to Ontario. It was unfortunate, but that's the way it went. And then, pardon me, in 97, I planned to go to Bella Coola because, again, in the Don Hunter Rene Dahinden book, Rene specifically notes that Bella Coola, in his opinion, would be the hot spot of Sasquatch activity. If you wanted to see a Sasquatch, in his opinion, that's where you go, Bella Coola, which is central coastal British Columbia. For a long time, it was fly in or sail in only. But then the local people built a road from the main highway. They actually built it themselves. And so I planned this trip, and I called Rene in 97, talked to him about it, because Thomas will confirm his name and his number was in the phone book. So I was able to look it up because I ripped out a few pages in one of the BC telephone books. Don't tell BC tell. Ripped out a few pages and brought them with me in case I ever needed to call those people. And I called Rene. And I spoke with him for a while, and at that point he was pretty jaded about everything and a little bitter about everything. But he strongly advised me to take a handy cam, video cam, which I had planned. And he said, Thomas does his accent best, but he said something like, you have to take a camera because that's how we're going to prove these things, catch them doing something that is not normal. So I went out to Bella Coola. I flew to Vancouver. And I got on a charter plane to Bella Coola, and I spent 2 weeks in the mountains in Bella Coola. And so after that, I didn't see Sasquatch, but it was quite an enriching experience. And then I continued to go back to BC for many years. But I will say in 95, I called John Green because I went to Harrison Hot Springs. And of course, this is predating cell phones. I went to a phone booth, found Green's number and called him. The phone rang a couple times. Someone picked up and said hello. It was clearly John Green's voice because I knew it from seeing him on documentaries. And I just totally lost it, and I hung up. I just freaked out, and I just went, because it just hit me so hard, and I thought, no, I can't bug this guy. He's been harassed and whatnot his whole life. I need to leave this guy alone. He's in his golden years. Why am I bothering him? So I let it go. And but then I would go back to BC on vacations and trips, and I went to I did the Inside Passage working on a cruise ship. I also did the Inside Passage on a vacation. If you don't know that, that's the Inside Passage of British Columbia. And I went up to Ketchikan, did some investigating over there, Queen Charlotte Islands. And then eventually I hooked up with John Green, but we can get into that a little later. But yeah, BC keeps calling me back all the time. I just love it. I almost moved out there permanently onto the Sunshine Coast, but the houses were just too expensive for me. It's pricey. So that's my BC time. And I still travel out there. It's been a few years, but I still go out there when I can. I love it. There's something magnetic about BC. If you haven't been there, you have to go.
So you were saying something about Dahinden being rather despondent or jaded or whatever in the process as it was at the time. Did you find him to be that way too, Thomas?
Yes.
You're definitely not getting an invite to Thanksgiving.
Rene was Rene. There's no other way to describe him.
At the best of times, he was rather morose, and
well, of
the only
course.
time he was happy was
He had serious doubts about the whole subject, I would say, the last 8 years of his life.
Yeah. I think the only time he was truly happy to see his expressions on his face was when he was doing Kokanee commercials. He was getting paid for that.
And Rene was downhearted because everything he did, he never, ever had a good sighting himself. He saw footprints, he interviewed hundreds of people, he investigated, but he never had a sighting himself. At least he never believed he did.
It's amazing. It makes you wonder. It makes you think when you think about these characters, the icons of the whole phenomena. I mean, Green, Dahinden, and I'm not going to mention him, but it's they were so involved. They were the icons, and yet neither one of them even caught a glimpse of a Sasquatch in their lifetime.
Well, Titmus did, allegedly.
Tell me about that.
Bob Titmus claimed 2 sightings, one before he was ever involved in Sasquatch when he was working on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline during the war. He claimed to have seen a creature on a beach on the coast of Alaska as he was heading up. And once more, I'd say in the late 1970s, not too far from, where was that? But anyway, he claimed to have seen 3 of them climbing up a mountainside.
The 4 horsemen, Krantz, Byrne, Green, Dahinden, never claimed to have seen a Sasquatch.
Even Byrne has never claimed to have seen one?
Nope.
Never.
How about you, Todd?
Well, I can't say that I've seen a Sasquatch. No, I can say that I've seen a few things that may have been a Sasquatch, but I didn't get enough of a view to make that determination. So I'm reluctant to say that I've seen a Sasquatch. It could have been a bear. The situation as it unfolded tells me that it probably wasn't a bear because of its height and what it did. To give you a little background, I was on the Sunshine Coast, which is north of Vancouver on its own peninsula, for those who don't know, in a place called Seashelt, which I think is a very highly active area, an interesting, magnificent area. And I was on an expedition, but I was walking at the time with my then partner on one of those Forest Service roads, which are quite wide and they taper off on the edges for drainage. And we had just come around a corner and we were basically surrounded on the sides by, I can't remember what berries they are, maybe salmon berries, some berry bushels that were really tall and pretty gnarly. And so as I came around the corner, and I had my Handycam ready, trust me, my Handycam was always on and my button was ready to hit record, came around the corner and I just caught a flash of something. And really I just saw from what maybe had been a shoulder and the side, and it just literally went through these bushes like it was nothing. And you could see the bushes parting, like something was going whoosh, whoosh, through the bushes. And these bushes were probably 10 to 12 feet tall, I would think. And what makes me wonder if it was a bear was because, again, the side of the road tapers off. So the side of the road is not at the same level. The road is built up, and because they build the road. So there's probably a good foot or two of just gravel and whatever they used to build these 4 service roads. And so whatever it was pretty tall. Could it have been a bear standing up eating berries? Yes, it could have. Could it have been a bear parting those brambles? I don't know. It was just really weird because it looked like something was just the way the brambles were separating and spreading out. It looked like something was using, what would be presumably arms. And then it continued to move on the other side. We didn't know how far back the brambles went, but we were able to get up a little higher and see there was a clearing beyond the brambles, maybe 40 feet back, maybe approximately. And so whatever it was continued to we could hear it moving around in that clearing. But again, I didn't see enough of it. And of course it happened so fast that by the time I got my button on the record, my finger on the record button, it was gone. It was already happened. And it was on the other side of the brambles. So I don't know. I don't know what it was. But it was interesting. It was broad daylight. It happened very quickly. But I can't say it was a Sasquatch.
I think it was Thomas. He used to hang around those times. He used to hang at those places in those times. He goes to the woods, people. Oh yeah, he's crazy back in those days. But so you've been in it since, like you said, you were out here in '95. So you've been doing it for a while. I don't think you shared really what got you into it.
Well, like all young boys, we're fascinated by mystery and we're intrigued by that. UFOs and Loch Ness Monster and Sasquatch. And of course, in the 70s, like someone mentioned, there were the shows In Search Of and Mysterious Monsters and those documentaries. So I saw those as a child. And you may remember at the time, our public school libraries had amazing 0-100 sections with quite a mix of, again, UFO, crop circles, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, things of that nature. A lot of cryptozoological type books, some Lauren Coleman stuff, some Daniel Cohen stuff, even the Green and Dahinden stuff made it into those public school libraries where I'm from. And, library time, I'd grab a book and go, wow, this is fascinating. Magazines like Discover, Omni, they had articles in them too. I don't remember seeing True or Argosy. They weren't really typical public school library magazines. But just reading about it when I was a kid, I became fascinated with it. And then in the late 80s, I had an opportunity to actually go out on my own. And that's when I started my field research. It was in the late 80s.
Todd, when you were here, did I take you to the Jacko site and
No, we didn't have time to do that.
Oh, okay.
When I came to see you, I was on a bit of a tight timeline because I was aside from stopping to visit you, I was visiting with Murphy. Mm-hmm. Wanted to see his museum, which was in Yale at the time, and then I believe it was in Yale. Does that?
Yeah, it was in Yale for 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to see that, and then I had to make my way to Greens because I wanted to scan as much as I could. So no, you didn't get to show me where that all supposedly happened, but maybe one day. I did get to stop at Ruby Creek, so I was there, not with you, but I did stop there and took it in. It was quite a thing to see.
And we all met at the restaurant there in Agassiz. You, myself, John Green, I think a number of other people. Zachariason was there and stuff. When we were listening to alleged audio.
Yeah, Darcy may have been there with us. There was a couple times.
Darcy was there. Yes.
There's a couple times where I took everyone out for lunch or dinner, and then Bill Miller came the second time.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, we had some great discussions there. It was a lot of fun. It was quite amazing. But yeah, but the first time I met you, Thomas, would have been when I stopped in at your place in Mission. And then I think it was maybe a few months later when I was back at Green's place to do more scanning, and that's when I invited a bunch of people out for supper, just as a bit of a thank you, and to talk to people and have a little powwow.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember if I took you to those places or not. Or
you offered, but it just didn't fit into the timeline. Yeah, but one day I'll take you up on that offer if it's still available. It might not be after this podcast. We'll see.
So tell me, you did a lot of copying of John Green's data per se. Do you feel like you got it all, or is there more stashed away in random areas that you did not have access to?
I definitely did not get it all. To get all of it would have taken probably 2 more weeks. In total, I spent 16 and a half days with John, not all consecutive days, but in total 16 and a half days. And I was literally scanning from 8 a.m. until at least 8 p.m., sometimes longer, as long as I could do it, as long as it wasn't disturbing John. We would break for lunch. We'd go for walks, sometimes for dinner. But I was focusing on the main stuff, the names that I recognized, the Titmuses, the Krantzes, the Dahindens, those people that I knew. And there's a lot of people that John Green kept in contact with, or they just wrote once or twice over his lifetime, and then you never heard of them again. So I didn't really focus on that material because I didn't really think that it would be as beneficial as some of the other stuff with the main researchers. So trust me, there's a lot more that I wasn't able to get because of time restraints. And then I realized that there was one file that I didn't know had fallen underneath, and Thomas knows how he had everything filed in his cabinet. And one of the files, which was the second folder of the John Green and Rene Dahinden correspondence, had slipped under, and I didn't realize that. Someone else discovered that after the fact, after I'd already done everything, but they graciously shared it with me, because I'd wondered, why is there really nothing in Green's file from 1967 October? There's hardly anything there between him and Dahinden. You'd think there'd be a lot. It was a very magical moment in research history. Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe someone stole it, because it seemed like some things were missing from the file. At least it appeared so. But maybe just stuff got passed around, or in this case, it slipped under. So I managed to get that, thankfully, because it filled in some gaps there for me. But there's still more stuff to be scanned. But I know that the family has it, and they're very guarded with it right now. Understandably, because you never know what people's intentions are. John gave me full permission to do what I was doing, and I met with all the family members, including befriending his grandchildren, who were also musicians, so we had a lot in common. And they were a little reluctant at first. They didn't know who I was. Was I swooping in to take his collection? So I had to assure them that no, that my intent was just to preserve it, to archive it. And then, as you probably heard me talking about before, there were thousands of letters, thousands of pages, hundreds and hundreds of letters. And some letters were 12 pages long, handwritten. So you can imagine I had to read each and every one of those. Well, I didn't have to, but I read each and every one of those letters. And then I would summarize the main points to do with Sasquatch research. I wouldn't worry too much about, the dog died last week or my wife left me. I focused on the main things that we would all be interested in. And then I indexed everything. So there's so many entries that I indexed. And it took me 3 years, and I'm not exaggerating. It took me 3 years, at least 3 hours a night on weekdays, and then double that on weekends, reading through everything. Then there were photos, slides, negatives. Then there were the cassette interviews, everything from Roger Patterson interviewing Beck to John Green interviewing Glenn Thomas, and everything in between. Ostman, there was so much stuff. So it's all cataloged, and I'm slowly but surely sharing it on the Sasquatch Archives channel, on the Sasquatch Archives Facebook page, but there's just so much to share. It's impossible to share it all. And there's a lot of stuff that your average enthusiast wouldn't be interested in, but people like Thomas and you gentlemen would be interested in those letters that seemingly don't really mean anything, but in the bigger picture, they do.
So I've got to ask you a question, Todd. One of the things that I bug Thomas about a lot is preservation of his material. For we always jokingly say, the Thomas Steenburg Memorial Museum. And one of the great things that I feel was sad is when Rene Dahinden died, basically all his stuff got shoved into a shed and is presumably rotted away. Have you done something for yourself so that in the future this material is preserved for future generations?
Well, I think the Sasquatch Archives YouTube channel is part of that. Over time, there'll be more and more added, but everything that I have is backed up at least 3 times in case I have a computer crash. And I've got a few people in mind when that day comes where I'm circling the drain rather quickly. I've got a few people in mind that I would pass it on to, so they can preserve it as well. Whatever doesn't become public by then, it will go into the hands. Now realize I don't have any original stuff. I only have scans. So the originals are still with the Green family. And is it the Kilby Museum, Thomas?
Yes, Kilby Museum has quite a bit of the John Green.
Yeah. So, I haven't made any formal plans yet, but my wife knows what to do if I were to die tomorrow. So it's all good. But yeah, I actually wanted to maybe sometime talk to Thomas about archiving his stuff. I offered to buy his stuff just to make sure it got saved, but Thomas is, he's a very wealthy man and he doesn't need the money. So.
Right.
And him and Donald Trump, always bragging about what they're worth.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is, like I said, we bugged Thomas about it, and it's a shame what happened to hit the Dahinden stuff. And, the recent passing, sudden passing of Carrie Arnold, it just shows that, not just us old guys, but, the younger guys, they got to make sure that they have things arranged. Because I would personally, because I know you've done untold hours of work with the archives, and I would hate to see it not last around for a very, very long time.
It's electronically saved, so it should last forever as long as we still use those mediums. And it's backed up quite a few times. As long as YouTube is around and Facebook, it'll always be there. At least the stuff that's been made public. Again, there's hundreds and hundreds of letters, and to make those all public, only maybe 100 people in the world would take an interest in a letter that John Furman wrote to John Green in 1964. Right? It's just, for the most part, it's not a game changer. It's the stuff to do with the 1958 Jerry Crew stuff, the Ostman, the Roe, 1967, 69. There's certain years that we all recognize. 59, 1960, 61 with the Pacific Northwest Expedition. These are years that really have been formative with Sasquatch research and really steered things in a certain direction. A lot of the other stuff is not as critical, although it's important to have because it's part of the puzzle, but it's not the main pieces. But for sure, it just won't disappear. If that's a concern of anyone, I can assure you that the Sasquatch Archives and everything you see behind me, because I've got original copies of books and, you name it, I've got it. Magazines dating way back. Some you can't get anymore. It's all going to be preserved. I mean, it's already all scanned electronically. Everything I have is scanned as far as magazine articles and book covers and things. But it's in good hands, and my wife knows what will come of it if I disappear.
That's great news because I think historically maybe the Sasquatch world has done a good a job of archiving as they should. And like I said, I go back to Dahinden. You have all these old researchers that jealously guarded their material to the grave, and then it was lost forever. So it's really, I think it's really good that there's people like you that are saving this stuff for future generations, because there's stuff you might have in your collection that you think is little value or meaningless now that, who knows, it may be a piece of a puzzle that, 30 years from now gains importance.
Absolutely. And, John Green was one who didn't believe that his collection meant anything, because I had to kind of pester him to permit me to scan. When I first went to visit him, the goal was just to get information, because I was writing some books about Bigfoot researchers. I've since abandoned that for various reasons, but I was pestering John via emails and phoning him, and I just needed information. But it got to a point where he said, "Listen, you can't keep bugging me for this stuff. Just come out to look at my files and do the research yourself. I can't do the research for you." He said it in a nice way, but I understood. So I took that as an invitation, and I went out there, and I said to John after my first day, I said, "John," because I spent about eight hours just going through the Krantz file, and I wasn't even done yet. I was just making notes. I wasn't scanning. I was just making notes. And I said, "John, your stuff really needs to be saved. It needs to be digitally saved." And he said, I don't see the value in that. It's really, until Sasquatch is found, it's useless. I said, "Well, Sasquatch might be found tomorrow, so we should be saving this, because you've got," at that point it was 45 years or something of material. And he just said, "No, I just don't see the value in that." And I thought, well, maybe he just doesn't want me, on his doorstep, scanning this stuff. So I let it go. And then the next time he invited me back, because I said, I only got this far in this much. And he said, "Well, come back." So I made plans to come back. And when I knocked on his door and I came in, the first thing he basically said was, "You know what? I thought about what you said, and I think it's a good idea that you do scan this material, because if it's important to you, it's important to others."
Well, I'll tell you what, Todd, if it's proven eventually that the Sasquatch was never nothing more than mythology and folklore, it has to be cataloged for that too, because it's important mythology and folklore.
You're absolutely right, because from a cultural perspective, it's as important as from a biological perspective. So it influences cultures, it influences people. But yeah, I know that there's a lot of people with collections, and some people that brag and boast about their collections, but they're not really sharing any of it. And that's a shame. I know Dahinden was very guarded with sharing information, and that ultimately was one of the reasons that him and John Green went different ways. But a lot of people, they get so busy with their life that it's hard to find time to share it. Just what you see behind me, it takes hours just to put all those things in sleeves. Thomas kind of laughs because his books are all used and they're dog-eared, and they've got mud from out in the field. And my books, I'm more of a collector of books. I've got copies that I use that are pretty banged up, but then I've got pristine copies that are all in vinyl, like book savers or comic book savers with backing board, and they're all labeled, and I have them all scanned. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, but it's worth it because, I can share in a video format. I can share like movie posters of Bigfoot. I can share book covers, magazine covers, so people can see. They can see what's out there, and I think it gives the research more credence, because people go, Bigfoot. You know what? There's a couple books out there, a couple of newspaper articles, a few magazine articles. What? There's thousands of books about Bigfoot. There's thousands of articles written about Sasquatch, tens of thousands of newspaper articles, and people go, "Are you serious? Are you kidding? There was a magazine article in 1929 about Sasquatch? What? Nationally syndicated magazine, Maclean's? What? They had no idea." So it's all about education too. So part of this is just educating those who can't fathom that there could be Sasquatch.
And
but the other,
sorry, just to build on that, one of the I ruffle feathers sometimes. You hear about somebody that supposedly has the great picture or the great video that they have in their collection, but they won't share for whatever excuse.
Yeah.
And I've said, I don't care if you have a stuffed dead Sasquatch in your basement and you're not sharing it, then your research is irrelevant to the Sasquatch world.
Yeah.
So any research that's not shared for public discussion, public review, public discourse is meaningless to the subject. And a lot of collectors or people that research that hide their material for whatever reason, at the end of the day, they're irrelevant to the research as a whole.
What good have they done other than for their own ego, really?
And I always point out to Da Vinci. They say that he designed a blast furnace and never did anything with the design, and it took Europe 400 years later to reinvent it. So there was 400 years where the blast furnace could have existed, but didn't. So really, we talk about Da Vinci, as a great guy, but all of his designs that were never invented were irrelevant to the development of those different projects.
And that's a great point. And that's why I think John Green was an amazing researcher, because not only did he have an open door policy where anybody could come to his house and go through his files, he also captured it in his books. On the Track of the Sasquatch, Year of the Sasquatch Files, Sasquatch the Apes Among Us, and then all the permutations of those books. And even up to his last days, he was still reading about Sasquatch, looking into it. And Thomas knows he had an open door. If you wanted to come by his house and go through his files, no problem. Just don't take anything. It stays there. But he would say, if you want to borrow this, you can bring it back. And I see that in his letters from the 60s and 70s. They were exchanging information constantly, and he would loan out casts. He would mail a cast, an original cast to someone at a university, and then have to remind them, hey, you got to send that back to me.
Ask Thomas what happens when you break something he lends out.
Well, I'm guessing a book.
Thomas knows.
Why don't you share that with us, Thomas?
What was the question?
What happens when you break something that John lent you?
Well, I wouldn't know. That was Bill Miller.
Oh boy!
You broke it. It was kind of a joke. We borrowed. You see the Gigantopithecus skull behind me here. Well, John Green had an original one when Grover first started making copies of his original Gigantopithecus skull design. And we were doing talks for the Sasquatch Days and Canada Day presentation for many years in Harrison Hot Springs. Led Bill Miller and I, and John loaned us the skull. And Bill was always kind of a fast driver, so we'd load all this stuff in the back of his truck, and he wouldn't slow down for the speed bump. The thing go and Bill was actually handing all this stuff back to John, and I helped unload it. And Bill joked, said, I know we smashed it into 1,000 pieces, John, but that's joking, not knowing when John opened up that box, it really was broken. The jawbone part of it. You did break it. What? Steenburg, did you break that when you took it in? I said, don't blame me, Miller. But it really was, because it broke at a place where it broke before, and John super glued it back together. So we took it to a guy in downtown Vancouver we were talking to about getting a big statue made at the time, if they were interested in financing it, which they weren't. Everyone was always interested until they saw what it would cost money, and then they were interested.
That was for the hotel.
Yeah, for the hotel. And we got him to fix it up, and he put it back together beautifully. You never know there was a crack, gave it back to him. And John gets that, said, looks better than ever. Thank you. And he looks right at Bill. Thomas. Bill held that against me for a long time. It was funny, but
I know he must have been zinging you for years after that one.
he tried.
Yeah. As only he could.
And only he could. Captain of the Zingers.
You know, Todd's right. I mean, John Green was the most giving guy I have ever met that has anything to do with this phenomena of Sasquatch. I came to the West Coast and it was really burning passion. I wanted to do one of two things. I wanted to meet Chief Dan George. I don't know if Todd would know who that was. And I wanted to meet John Green. Well, Chief Dan George died the year before, so John Green won by default. Now, how do you get in touch with John Green? I was part of BigfootForums.com. And I sent an email to Danny Perez saying, do you have John's email address? Not knowing that hundreds of people on the site had John Green's email address. But he gave it to me, and I sent an email to John. Well, I asked Bipto, hey, listen, if I can get an interview with John Green and, you'd publish it here on Bigfoot Forums. He said, yeah, if you can get it, sure. So anyway, I sent John Green an email and I said, John, I'm with blah, 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 blah. And, I'd like to come over and talk to you for a while and just put it on tape, Well, I was in the afternoon. That night, I got a reply from him, an email. And it boiled down to, sure, why don't you come over tomorrow morning about 9:30? So I said, yeah, I was on my merry way to, Harrison Hot Springs the next morning. I arrived there promptly, too nervous. I was there like an hour early. I went and knocked on the door a half hour ahead of time, and John opens the door. I said, John, he said, Jerry? I said, yeah. You're early. I said, yeah, I am a bit early. Come on in. Brings me in, says, sit down there, pointing at the sofa. I sit at the sofa, and John is like, what the hell do I do with this guy now? June is saying, John, come and finish your breakfast. And so John picks up one of Chris Murphy's books, who got me turned on to Chris Murphy, by the way. And he said, here, read this. And he threw it in my lap and he went around the corner to have breakfast, But he came back after he finished his breakfast a half hour later. And I was there till about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We talked inside and out. Well, the interview itself is on tape in a number of places. But, he was so... he wanted to preach the Bible to people, and he wanted them to know the truth. He didn't want them to go off half-cocked and half-baked, which is something that a group of us here are trying to bring back in style again. Don't go off half-cocked on the subject. Do your homework, do some study, and, try to attack it in a scientific manner. And all of us who knew John Green knew that that was his thing, And he was a good friend for years after. He was a good friend. That's how open the guy was. He'll take a stranger in he never saw before. It could have been an axe murderer, except I didn't have an axe in my hand. And he brought me in with his family and sat me down in a chair and just talked to me all day long, kind of thing. So I had to love the guy for that. I had to love the guy for that, for his givingness, and he's wanting to teach. He's wanting you to absorb the proper things, not all the rest of the garbage that's out there, and to think for yourself. So, that was my experience with John Green, and I'm sure a lot of others had the same.
I always had to do the dishes when I was there. For
Yeah, you made sure of that.
Yeah, she always made me do dishes. I'd smile at John. John, you everyone else with you have to do the dishes. He never answered the question. He just smiled at me. Did he make you do the dishes, Todd?
No, because I wasn't in the army.
I have two memories of John that stick out, and I met him. I was lucky enough that Thomas arranged a lunch for John, Bill Miller, actually my whole family, and a couple of friends. And we met him at what was the Laughing Goat restaurant, Thomas.
Yeah.
And the first thing that just shocked me was, as we're talking, John had one of those old-fashioned boxes that used to use for memo cards, like recipes and that sort of thing. And he just plunks it on the table and says, take a look at it. And you open it up, and there was just full of little plastic baggies of hair and stuff that he had collected over the years, just sitting in there. And then the other thing that was from the same, and I fanboyed out, I'll admit it, I fanboyed out because I met this guy. But I had On the Track of Sasquatch, which my grandmother gave me back in 1974. And that's what got me onto Sasquatch. And I asked him to autograph the book for me. And as he's trying to sign it, he was older and his hand was shaky. He sat there and apologized to me because his autograph didn't look like his signature. And it was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're John Green. Like, what do you mean? It's not you, right? And he was just such a humble guy. I mean, yeah, he was strong-willed, but the humility he showed was just something else.
I have a question for Todd that I'm going to bug me if I don't ask you this question, and we lose time with you. Out of all the information and data you've mined, what sticks out to you the most? What's one of the most, oh my God, this is interesting shit?
You know what? I don't know if I can pinpoint one thing, because when I started reading through the letters, it was just so overwhelming, all the information, and it was as if I was living through those moments. But maybe if I were to pinpoint anything in particular out of the hundreds of letters that I read of John Green's, I think some of the communication between him and Bob Titmus regarding stuff that was happening in Bluff Creek, and how Titmus had gone back to Bluff Creek after the Patterson-Gimlin film, and what he observed, to see that in writing and in his own penmanship, and that really stood out for me. And I think too, to see Albert Ostman's scribbler, to actually hold that in my hands, I'll be honest with you, I don't believe the Ostman account at all, and I'm going to make a video about that, really highlighting some holes in that, and that's going to upset some people viewing this, but everyone's welcome to their opinion, and I certainly have mine. But to hold that scribbler, knowing that Albert had written that, because obviously he's so ingrained in Bigfoot Sasquatch culture, like an icon almost. So to have that there and to read, the bad grammar and all the bad punctuation, as an editor, I was like, this is a nightmare. But it was so amazing to hold that scribbler. And I think there was one more thing that stood out, which was Thomas would know, and maybe Jerry and Bill and Leon know, that after the Pacific Northwest expedition, Tom Slick was funding the BC expedition. So there was Titmus, Rene, and well, actually it was just Titmus and Green, because Rene had since said no way, Jose. So Green and Titmus were being financed by Tom Slick, and there came a point where Titmus wrote Tom Slick and said, "You shouldn't pay me anymore because I'm not finding anything. So take me off the payroll, because I'm not giving you anything of value." And I thought, for all those people who accused Titmus of hoaxing and just in it for the money, why would someone who, in their eyes, was a scammer, a quack, why would he say that to his financer? Why would he say, I don't want you to pay me anymore, like take me off the payroll? If he was really going to milk Slick for anything, he'd be fabricating evidence. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to fabricate Sasquatch evidence, mm-hmm. especially when the person's not there with you. You're just mailing them saying, "Oh, I found this, I found that, I saw this, I saw that. I experienced this, I experienced that." But Titmus did none of that. It was all matter of fact. So that was, not that I doubted Titmus, but a lot of people do because of what Byrne said. And the whole thing with the moose hair, which was determined by someone who had nothing to do with analyzing hair, by the way. And so Titmus got a bad rap for that. Unfair, too. But I think those three things are the three things that stand out, other than the fact that just the whole collection of things that I looked at with John Green, it was just overwhelming. So maybe it's not fair just to point out three things, because it's everything combined.
Well, a little clarification there. Actually, Rene really begged Tom Slick to be able to go up there and join Titmus in what was called the British Columbia expedition. But Titmus said, "You send that Swiss oddball up here, I'm out," because Titmus couldn't stand him.
Yeah.
Couldn't stand him. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I thought maybe and thanks Thomas for clarifying. I know that Rene was quite bitter by what happened in 1959 with the Pacific North and Byrne coming into the picture and things like that.
All were. Yeah, they all were. Yeah.
And I know that Rene and Titmus were at odds for sure. So yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Well, especially with the Indian and the pony and the big pile of pony poop incident.
Yeah, which is hearsay, right?
Yeah, here's several sources. Yeah.
Yeah.
Todd, I want to talk to you about bias. What's your criteria for what goes into your collection and what doesn't? Or do you have to find yourself tamping down a bias and saying, I don't know if I want to put this in with the rest of the videos, but...
as far as bias goes, I hope I don't have any. I'll gladly accept anything that someone sends me. And, Eric Beckjord was a researcher that a lot of people couldn't stand, didn't agree with. But if you look at my channel, there's at least 2 videos concerning him, and one that is outright, in some people's opinion, ridiculous, where he's analyzing the Patterson-Gimlin film, and he's talking about seeing faces on the back of Patty, alien faces, this and that. So, Eric Beckjord is part of the research history, and he had a newsletter, and he was quite involved, as whacked out as he may have seemed. And so for me, I don't really, I hope I don't have any bias. I just post what I think people would be interested in. I even did a video concerning Bigfoot and UFOs, and I have my own thoughts on that. But, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's controversial. There's different camps of research camps. You've got your flesh and blood people, you've got your paranormal or woo people, and you've got people who are teetering on both ends of that. You've got the UFO are involved with Sasquatch. You've got the people who believe that Bigfoot are evil, and those who think they're forest people. So I try to stay neutral with what I share. I may have my own personal thoughts, but my channel wasn't designed to just give one aspect of the research. So you'll see stuff that has Jack Lapsaritis giving a presentation, and that upset people. When I put the Beckjord stuff up and I put the Lapsaritis stuff, people were upset because they said, "Oh, this totally taints the research."
You know what I think people don't understand is that you can't have the yin without the yang. You can't have a healthy debate on something unless you're willing to debate something. I mean, kindly Uncle Voldemort, which is what Beckjord used to call himself in the latter years, was just a total opposite of John Green.
Yeah.
And yet they were friends.
Yeah.
They were friends.
Yeah.
You hear Justin, well, don't you say anything bad about Eric. He's a friend of mine,
Yeah, and I asked John about that because I was surprised because of all the hate for Beckjord. And John said, I've always gotten along with the guy. I don't agree with his philosophies, but he's always been kind to me. After I had to yell at him to stop calling me at 3 a.m, everything was fine. And that kind of that educated me too, thinking I can be friends with someone who I don't agree with.
Yeah.
And I have that in my daily life. People don't agree that there's Sasquatch, and those are my friends. So why would I shun them? And why would I shun someone's research philosophies? I don't agree with them, but it's what they see, it's what they experience, it's what they believe. And I also put up some of the Wallace stuff, and people are like, "Oh my God, how dare you?" I put up some of the Ivan Marks stuff, and yeah, people are giving me flack, but I feel okay about it because it's part of the research. Ivan Marks was a huge part of this research. Whether you buy into his films or not, he was there. He was there right from the get-go.
I agree with you totally there, Todd. I mean, you say you're an archivist preserving the history. And when you're preserving the history, you need to be unbiased and say, at least in my opinion, and go, this is what it was. Now you can it's fair to put commentary on it, whether you believe it or not. But no, I do take my hat off to you because a role of an archivist is preservation, not filtration.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. So I like to think that I'm not biased in any way, shape, or form. I mean, obviously, there's some stuff that maybe I'm showing bias because only a handful of people will be interested in that. And is it worth my time to spend hours making a video for 5 people? Now, I will get around to some of that stuff, but I'm focusing on that which will appeal to most people right now because I want to draw in as many people to see the channel as possible because I think that's going to educate people. The more people know about the rich history of the subject, the more they'll start to second guess what their personal bias may have been. That's the ultimate goal, is to reach as many as possible.
Well, I don't mind you putting that stuff up, even if I totally disagree with these guys. I still got along with most of them back in the day, and I thought they were nuts, and they were. But it doesn't matter. It's still part of the history. And I loved it when you put up that one. I remember being there. And we're all talking about Bexford after he got kicked out of the post.
Yeah.
And he's marching up and down the outside, passing out leaflets saying how afraid the whole community is of him telling the truth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Wearing his ET mask.
You know what I like about this collection is that I find it invaluable just totally on a personal level, especially for us guys who can remember the incidents and events that are depicted in some of those videos. So it rekindles in my case, the enthusiasm I felt when we first discovered this subject for the first time. It's like taking a walk down memory lane, looking at a lot of those videos that are quite old by today's standards. But then so am I.
And that's so true, Jerry. There's some stuff that we watched as children and it disappeared, and then we see it again because someone put it up on YouTube or shared it somewhere. And I know exactly what you mean about rekindling that joy. It's like getting a new girlfriend, right? It's like, wow.
Don't tell the old one.
Yeah. So I felt that way when I first saw the BBC 1968 documentary, Bigfoot, America's Abominable Snowman. I went, oh my God, I'd never seen that before. And it was rumored to have existed. And some people denied that it existed. And then there it is. And it just opened up the floodgates for other stuff, including, well, how did that come about? What's the history on that? And then that just opened up so many other possibilities of other things that have been seemingly lost and forgotten. And that movie is what got Meldrum involved in this study.
That's also what a lot of people forget, Todd, is everyone always wonders why Roger Patterson never went on with his plans to make his own documentary. That's because that documentary replaced it and became part of that. Well,
that's just it. The BBC jumped in and made a documentary, and then Patterson, Diatley, and the BBC made a handshake deal, that Patterson would give them his footage of Paddy and some footage of eyewitnesses that he had interviewed, and with the understanding that Roger could use portions of the BBC at his leisure, their footage from their documentary. So in like, I still consider that Patterson's documentary because because there's the BBC version and then there's the Diatley Patterson version, which hasn't come to light, hasn't been shared on YouTube or anywhere else, but people have it in their collection. I don't have permission to share it. So I've been hesitant to do that because I really don't want to upset some specific people that I may need to be on their good side one day, including the Patterson family, of course. So, I'm sitting on this documentary that's just, in my opinion, so amazing, but I can't do anything with it. Whereas the BBC documentary I could, because in the UK, there is a copyright law that states after 50 years something has aired, it's in the public domain.
That's
so
right.
I had to wait for that 50 years to happen before I could make it public.
Hey, Leon, you were going to say something a couple minutes ago, but you were on mute.
I know. I'm not just on mute. It's like you guys are. It's funny watching you guys see memory lane, because I'm not memory lane. I mean, I don't know the guy. I mean, I know the people you're talking about, but I don't know them personally. So to me, it's funny to watch you guys go back to there and kind of regress a bit.
Why? Because we're the cool kids and you're jealous?
No, because it just doesn't matter how old we are. We're all decrepit in regards to technology, except for Todd. The thing I like about Todd, and what caught me immediately when I started watching Todd's channel was that he's an archivist. He's not there for an opinion. He's not doing an opinion show. He's not doing an entertainment show. He's not doing a show on people talking about their encounters. He's an archivist, and that's what he should keep doing, is staying neutral, telling all the stories, the good, bad, and the ugly, so that if it does turn out that we are all validly correct, then it fits into all that. Even like Thomas said in regards to the folklore side of it too, is boy, won't we look stupid if we're all wrong. It is possible that all the birds are flying the wrong direction, unfortunately. And I mean, I'm the psychic guy. It's not the psychic guy, psychology guy. So I deal with the brain. So I mean, it's nice to see that you guys are kind of remembering and smiling over these stories that Todd's can stimulate because of his research that he's done and the foundation he has. Because we were talking about this, not just with what he's doing, but in regards to even like depository, where people, I said depository, not suppository, as much as it seems like it would be a suppository, of data where people could have audio sounds in, and so that you could verify whether or not you're even listening to Sasquatch, instead of everything that's unknown sounding is Sasquatch, it seems online, which is just drives you crazy. But as far as a tool that Todd's providing, I don't, for me, and watching what he does for Sasquatch Archives, is it's archives. It archives a lot of the prehistory that needs to be done, so we can see why people started building on certain ideologies, where the ideologies came into the system, and how that's influenced people, and also the wingnuts. It's you guys heard me say this 100 times. It's not like you're dealing with the Christian community, which has been around for 2,000 years, dealing with Jesus, 12 disciples, and go from there. You're dealing with Western culture concepts of Sasquatch, which are a little more tainted, especially when it comes to First Nations. A lot of our projection onto First Nations stories of Sasquatch are white Anglo-Saxon ideas that have been placed on there, because some traditions of First Nations, they got clothes, they can make fires, they have weapons, they use tools. Others, they don't. So which one do we listen to, and all that kind of stuff, the impact of that. So I like studying systems. So when you have an archivist, like you're doing, Todd, and I'm not blowing smoke up your arse, by the way, because it is refreshing to hear somebody like you on some of the channels, especially when I'm invited to a lot of the channels. Thomas is now invited also to a lot of the channels, where we're just like, oh my God, come on, didn't you vet this guy before you brought him on? It's like when I first met 5 years ago, I said, he basically said, I'm surprised. I said to him that you're not an alcoholic. And his first line to me was probably the same as, she was welcome to the inmates that taken over the asylum. And I deal in the mental health field. So yeah, that's what I walked into. I didn't plan on walking into that, but that's what I walked into. I walked into a lot of people who were, their brains taking them on these trips. They don't know how to vet or identify it as that. They just feel like it's correct, and not knowing what makes people's brains feel things are correct doesn't mean they're truth or factual. But yeah, anyways, you're a breath of fresh air, and it's taken us probably 2 years now, almost a little over 2 years, to get a group of channels that are at least trying to be scientific, and using the scientific method, having a healthy skeptic like Bill. It's good to have a guy that's out of the box of the Kool-Aid drinking that goes on online, and it's even better when you have researchers that aren't in the Kool-Aid drinking. They're more into the what do I call it? Stop feeding people Kool-Aid and start feeding them smoothies that have nutrition in them, and that nutrition, and that's kind of what an archivist does. He provides a rich soil, a variety of information and data. So we have people like you, Nikki, Steve Calls, and that, where we can go back and Phil from Paranormal Breakdown, find out what they have in their archives, their data they've collected for it, so we can save ourselves, or maybe a lot of our followers, a headache and heartache that we followed, and also dismay, realizing there's something that's not adding up. I mean, God, it's been 50 years. Surely, if we put our minds to it with the amount of people we're doing it, we should be able to get these guys on film. Surely, unless all the birds are flying the wrong direction. But here's my spiel.
What he's basically saying to you, Todd, is you're the buffet restaurant, and you have no control over which tray everybody goes to.
That's right. That's great.
That's
great.
That's
great
pretty.
way of putting it.
That's a good analogy. And something that was surprising to me, being and I started as a field researcher and still continue to do that, but I'm more recognized as the archivist. But I still do my field research. It's just I haven't had as much time because the archiving is taking up a lot of my time. But what's surprising to me is there's a new generation of these researchers who don't know that there was a guy named Ray Wallace. They don't know there was a guy named Ivan Marks. They don't know there was a guy named Eric Beckjord, Jack Lapseritis. They don't even know who Roger Patterson is.
They don't even know who Thomas is. I couldn't believe that, especially guys on the East Coast in the States. It's like, how do you not know who Thomas is? You've been doing it for 40 years.
So one of the great things about the channel is that it's exposing people to something they weren't aware of somehow, and it makes them aware that hoaxing has been going on for a long time. It's not something that's new. It's not a new endeavor. And the same hoaxes play out over and over and over again. And also people, they just presume, the skeptical people, they presume that when the Wallace family came out, if they know about the Wallace family, that basically explained all the Bigfoot evidence. They have no idea that Bigfoot Sasquatch was documented long before Wallace came on the scene. Even the word Bigfoot didn't start in 1958, and people don't even know that. So that's been one great thing with putting all these videos out. People are becoming educated, and surprisingly so, because I just presume that everyone would know what the show Mysterious Encounters was, because it's less than 20 years old. But people are saying, I never heard of that show. Who's that young guy with Autumn Williams? Well, that's a guy named Matt Moneymaker, who started the FRO, right? So I find that amazing, because I guess I've been around a little longer than these people, not as long as Thomas has, but it just boggles the mind, right? As
what I find about that is that watching those archived videos, back then everybody was full of questions. Everything was questions. Everybody had questions. Today, everybody has the answers. Everybody has the answers, and they're all crap, 99.9% of them. That is the difference between then and now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's so true. Go ahead, Leon.
I was just if you look at, again, the tradition of the Four Horsemen, they all hated each other, as Thomas would say. He could manage them. I'm kind of like Thomas's personality. I seem to be able to manage everybody, even though either you love me or you hate me, but I'm going to always tell you the truth. And one of the brilliance I find with Thomas's researching or investigating is how he knows all of the people. He follows the families. He knows how they died. He stays in touch with the families. He doesn't just go to it's a Sasquatch. You know, if you ever get a chance to go on one of Thomas's tours, like he said about like going down there to see Wacko or Jackal or whatever, get him in a vehicle and let him take you on a trip. I did that because he only lives 3 hours from where I live, and I went up and saw him and that, and man, it was just great. We went to all these places that everyone's always talking about, but no one's ever been there, you know. And he has access to all of them, and you get this idea of being able to go back on site, the history of it. You can see it makes a huge difference to your psyche when you can tactilely experience a lot of this stuff instead of just, you know, hear it online. And then you're hearing this massive volume of Kool-Aid drinking, parroting that's going on. And of course, the more we hear it, the more we think it must be true because everyone's talking about it, but no one's asking the question, how do you know? You know, like, so the idea of having again, like for me, one of the things I've been putting out this year, I've been in the hospital for 6 months, by the way. You probably didn't know that, and I can't walk. So what I've been doing is doing couch potato stuff. So I've been offering $100 American. Oh my God, not American. Yes, American. Film what makes a whoop sound, so we can put that in the depository. Film what makes a tree knock sound. You know, film what makes a coyote sound like a Sasquatch. Since everyone keeps mixing that one up there, you know, because Thomas has seen it, I've seen it, Jerry has seen it. Coyote make this so-called Sierra sounds and the Klamath sounds, and it's like it's a coyote. I'm sorry. Well, you know, they have a coyotes all around them. I was watching the show the other day. Well, you know, Sasquatch uses a coyote because you can hear them in the coyote calls. No, what you can hear is a coyote calling a call you never heard before, and you've never seen a coyote make that call. All that stuff in order for us to push it ahead, to get past where you're at as our archivist, so we can actually say, look, here's this depository of all this data of history. We can also put the evidence out there for the people who are actually, like, and I agree with Thomas, we should call investigators, not researchers. What are you researching? Do you know how to research? You know the scientific method? Oh yeah, we do the scientific method. Which one? Tell me which one you do. You know, they start floundering. You know, like, I have a question for all you four, because I'm doing some research. Some of you know this, but I wanted to ask you, have you ever heard of any accounts of Sasquatch with extended chins? Yes, chins, but extended chins.
Not on the top of my head, no.
No, nor have I. And the reason for the question is I want to find this because one of the other $100 rewards is Samurai Chat. In order for us to have vocabulary, we need our head positioned back farther than what reports are Sasquatch, which is a head. It can't work that way. And the jaw is different. Humanoids have a different jaw. That's why we can collect in such huge numbers, is because of vocabulary, articulation. The exception to that is the, oh my God, I can't remember it, the 70,000, they operated from Spain all the way over to Asia. Neanderthals, they talked with a high-pitched voice, but they still have an extended chin. So a Sasquatch doesn't have an extended chin. Plus, you have to be able to control your breathing. So can Sasquatch swim? Yes, I think they can. They can control their breathing? In other words, dive underwater. Apparently in Kamloops, yeah, there's a report there that some hunters had them go underneath where their ducks were and grab the ducks from underneath the water. So, okay, so that's there. But the next question I need to find out for this data is, do they have extended chins? Because if they don't have extended chins, they can't talk. There's no space for the vocabulary system or for the vocal systems inside. So, and I'm pretty sure what it is, more likely, is probably a group of crows that hang around a cabin of Asian people that like watching martial arts shows, and they happen to be around the Sierra camp, and the crows are all in the trees talking samurai talk, like because they can mimic sounds like humans. So I don't know, I'm just joking.
Well, you know, Leon, one thing I'll say is, when you look at the Patterson-Gimlin film, it would appear that Patty does have an extended chin. Like, well, when you look at the profile of her face.
Well, it's how the chin. Like I always, I have to explain to people. They're always saying, "Well, I see a profile. It looks like it's a chin." I mean an extended chin. It's hard to see extended chin when a person has hair.
So,
one guy's.
So this is an extended chin, right? This is an extended chin.
It's got a ball. It's got a ball on it. So and again, it's non. Look, you can't use the new 4K sharp, clear
Of course.
picture because that's correct, the image of it. So it's not evidence enough for me to be able to say that is. I just know that out of all the other reports, I've never heard anyone said, you know, they never say they have a chin like ours. They always say the chin's back, the mouth's slit. It's not like our mouth.
Well, one thing I will say is, it seems that the vast majority of witnesses will say that the face looked very human.
Right.
I don't remember hearing them say it didn't have a chin or the chin was receding. They just say it looks like a human. And I think if the chin was different than ours, that would have been noted in the description, but not necessarily, of course.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it would be, because again, when you see something, the average report is about 5 seconds. I'm being gracious with that. It's usually on the roadside. 80% are roadsides, from my understanding, statistically. So you're seeing something for 8 seconds. Where is your eyes going to go in 8 seconds of the unknown? So if you see something that's unknown, or you're uncertain of, where's your eyes go naturally? It always goes to where the eyes should be on the animal. So you automatically, because that's primal, that's your primal brain. You got 3 brains in your brain. You got 1 brain, but it has 3 brains in there. Your back 2 brains are ahead of your frontal lobe brain by 0.08 seconds. Your brain's processing the speed of light, going through all your files in your brain, all your archives in there. What am I looking at? What am I trying to process? And so when I'm hearing people that are like, when I'm talking to most people who have close up, I'm not interested in just Joe Blow kind of, I've had an experience with Sasquatch. I'm looking for people, because I deal with people that have PTSD and are traumatically bonded to unknown events. And so when you come across a Sasquatch, there's a lot of data that comes in body language and facial expressions, breathing, and all that pattern that you should see with somebody who's seeing an unknown event. Now, body language doesn't necessarily tell you whether they're telling the truth or not. Time will tell you that, but it'll tell you whether or not they own what they're saying to you. And so it gives you a higher percentage of maybe hearing an encounter, like Thomas has done with interviews, and I've done with interviews, which makes me want to stick around the area because it seems a little more richer because of the response I'm hearing from somebody. Their blood flushing out of their face, they're hyperventilating as they're talking, they're breathing up here, not down here. They're not in a relaxed state. Their wife realizes something's going on. They're on antidepressant meds for 3 months. They can't sleep at nighttime. You know, there's all these kind of richer kind of stories I'm talking about. So also about, 20/20 vision. 20/20 vision is this right here. That's it. Your thumb width. That's 20/20 vision. This isn't. Everything behind me, your brain's reproducing right now. So how are you going to know whether or not you're looking at a chin that's extended? Well, I like the ones who bump into one, like Joe from, I can't remember his bloody acronym, because he's walking around a corner and walks around this thing, and all of a sudden it's right there and he goes, whoa! So he's 10 yards from this thing. You're going to get a lot more data from a guy like that. That's the reason why I'm asking everybody I'm talking. Do you remember? Because maybe people will start being aware of the chin. Because honestly, if your head, as soon as your head,
I'll tell you what people have described, Leon. Not so much as an extended chin, but you look at us. Our face sort of contours in almost down to a point. The Sasquatch, I've had a lot of witnesses tell me that the lower part of the face and where the lower jaw is, it's more squared.
Right.
If
you guys can do this online, just for fun, look at how human beings end up the capacity to talk, and they'll go into their anatomy. And so anatomy tells you lots of things. It tells you what kind of brain they must have. So if I have a capacity to hold my breath, that tells me what type of brain I have. It tells me whether or not I have a controlling system in my brain. I mean, there's a part of my brain that has a controlling system for my breathing. If I can talk, it's going to tell me that I have a language center as well in my brain. It tells me what kind of brain it is. All these are important. Like everyone keeps looking for these animal type of things. Well, if they're a lot more human than what we're saying there, because a lot of people seem to think that when they look just like human beings, well, they're going to have a lot of humanistic traits. Genetically, that's going to show up in how their patterns of their bodies develop, their brains develop, their mouths develop, their jaws develop. Again, there's not a single primate that can make any kind of language with the head forward. It's impossible. It has to be like this skull here behind me. The spine has to be right above the center part of the neck.
And you know what Leon's talking about, back in the mid 80s, when I was still in university taking my anthropology courses, there was a debate whether Neanderthals could actually talk because of that. But, you know, and I think just expanding a little bit on what Leon was saying is, you go back to, you know, and you would know better than I would, Todd, but you go back to reports of the 70s and 80s, you never heard about the sagittal crest. You may have heard that the head was cone-shaped, but you never heard people talking about the sagittal crest itself. Then when researchers started bringing forward, and anthropologists started bringing forward the term sagittal crest and that sort of thing, more and more people started to see it. The same with the brow ridge. And I think now, whether that is because, as Leon was saying, people had heard about this, whether they were watching In Search of or whatever, and now when they're going through their archive in their brain, when they have this unexpected sighting, these are things they're looking for as part of that recognition process. Maybe as things like the chin get discussed, that might be something that people are now going to put into their little archive of records and may show up more in sightings. So it's, you know, it's a sort of chicken or the egg scenario. Are people seeing these things because they've been conditioned that this is what they should see, or are we going to make it part of what we're seeing because that's actually what they saw?
Right. Right. And again, out of the panel here, I think I'm the only one who claims to have seen the Sasquatch. So, I mean, and what I saw wasn't like Thomas was the first person I told. And while I was interviewing Thomas, he thought it'd be neat to slip not by naming my name, but by telling the story. Well, I was just talking to a guy who said he saw juvenile Sasquatch on the back of the moose, you know. I'm sitting behind my camera going, you little stinker, you know. But yeah, that's what I saw. Who am I going to tell that to? You know, I work in a mental health profession. You know, I deal with belief systems. This guy's crazy. Yeah, around a campfire, maybe after a few shots of whiskey, you know, people talk about crazy things. But until
You know, I got a little 3-minute video here. I just wanted to play. I don't know if it pertains to what we're talking about. It probably doesn't.
Well,
But I think it's kind of interesting when people talk about vocalizations and such, what the human body is capable of doing. When people say, "Yeah, there was no human who made that sound."
oh, yeah.
A lot of you probably saw this video before, but this guy just floors me. I'm trying to get in touch with him as we speak. I just love this guy.
I gave that video, buddy. I sent you the video.
I'm not sure I sent it. You sent it to me, or I sent it to you. I'm not sure, but here it is anyway.
So it sounds, you get the whistles and then what really sounds like a pig mixed with a monkey. I mean, this is like my 4th attempt, but not whistling with my lips. It'll take some work, but it's definitely one of the harder ones. But the kind of pig monkey sound, I feel like I just like bam nailed it right there. See, the way I replicate just about anything I can hear is my muscles right here in the back of my throat along with the back of my tongue. I'm able to kind of move the shape of it. And you'll find that when you make calls, depending on what kind of call you're trying to make, like, hold on. Hello, baby.
Hello, baby.
So you got the ones that are whatever. Jurassic Park. But these ones real easy to mimic. Just you suck in instead of blow out. You get that pig monkey sound. So again, not being a dick, but I can replicate these. So
Yeah,
That was
brilliant.
his breakdown. That was his breakdown of the Sierra sounds.
And he's brilliant. And he talked about exactly what I'm talking about regarding the chin. In order for him to have the capacity to shift that stuff around that he has inside here to make those different vocalizations, you have to have a certain style of chin. You can't just have a walk chin, flat chin. You can't have it. It doesn't work. Your head can't be forward. And when I came across his channel and reached out to him, I said, I mean, he's not into this at all because he just thinks it's all BS now because of what he, a lot of us have come across is I think we have walked into too many, taken over the asylum, unfortunately. I don't have answers for the whole question of the Sasquatch, though, so I'm still open-minded to the whole idea of trying to figure it out. But I'm not going to drop my brain into my head and then step on it and then say, well, that's a Sasquatch. Well, how do you know? It's that one part when instead of pointing and saying it's a Sasquatch, could you please tell us from your inside out what makes you think that's a Sasquatch for educational purposes? And I think when I came across Todd's channel and that other guy's channel too, the great thing about it is that's very practical stuff. Tells you the beginning, tells you the atmosphere, tells you what it was like back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It gives you a contextual sense of understanding how things developed and stuff when you look at systems like I do and study systems. So for me, it's very tactile stuff. It's few and far between that we find online, which we all know about. But it's slowly shifting, which is nice. But a lot of these people are not going to want to give up their castles because of these, who are these people? Like honestly, Todd, when I invited Thomas onto some of the channels I've been on for interviews, and I found that people had no idea who he was. I just thought, how can you say you're researchers? How can you not know who Thomas is? Out of everybody to know, it's like Bindernagle. How can you say you don't know Bigger?
I've had some people say they don't know who John Green is. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But as it sounds, to me, if you don't see what did it, it's just a sound. There could be other explanations for it. And evidence, in my opinion, it's rather useless, even if it was a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s in the Sierra sounds, one of the professors who was doing the computer analysis at that time said whatever was making these noises at no time made the E sound that we can do. Basically language is E, and he gave a whole series of that.
But see, that's not even true, Thomas.
Yes, I know. That's what I was about to say. It's not true.
Yes.
Because we have each language has what's called phonemes, which are, and it's like that's where somebody that's Spanish can't recognize the difference between the B sound and the P sound. It's because they don't have that as part of their phoneme. So
absolutely.
Just because
that's what I was going to say, and with Leon's point, what they thought they knew back then, we are learning now, as time goes on, ain't necessarily so.
And exactly, when somebody is referring to research that was done 40 or 50 years ago to prove their point, the question is, what has the research since that time said? I can point, anyone can point back to, say the 60s where somebody says, oh, by physics, a bumblebee cannot fly. Okay, well, maybe by what we knew about physics 50, 60 years ago, that was true. What's the research said since? And the other thing when it comes to, like sounds, and it's not the Sierra sounds, but there is a Russian shaman folk singer.
Yes.
And her last name is Olena, Olena, that she does different shamanistic songs, and one of them that's Blessings of Nature. And and there's others out there, when she sings the range of animal sounds and such that woman can get is absolutely amazing. So if you really want to, debate on what people can and cannot do, listen to some of these other folk singers, other cultures, and the sounds that they can make, because if they can make wolf and owl sounds and everything else, why can't they make a Sierra sound, or like that gentleman that Jerry just did the video for?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing too is back then, like, I mean, it's funny to get attacked the way I get attacked sometimes from people when they're thinking about, I'm not saying to throw any evidence away, just put it on a box over here, let's take it one at a time and revisit it. So the idea about, here, I'll give you $100 if you can film what makes a whoop sound, you know, because there's more than one bird. There's a waterfowl bird that makes a whoop, and parts the P at the end, and there's an owl that makes a whoop sound, and there's a coyote that can make the Sierra sounds, you know, and the samurai chat, I'm pretty sure, is not a Sasquatch. I'm pretty sure it's, I won't tell you what it is right now because I'm wanting people to, you know, send in their information so I can maybe give $100 away, you know, because it'd be kind of nice so they can show their friends and they could bet it. And then other people are going to say, no, that's not it. And that's all we can hope for, is that stuff gets upgraded. I'm going to send the Sierra Sounds, the samurai chat, to some linguistic specialist PhD people I know here over at the university. And I'm going to say, I want you guys to go through. I'm not going to tell them anything. What do you think this is? And just let them go through it. And I'm pretty sure they're going to come up with, like you said, modern technology of what we have today. Because all that, you know, the idea is when Muldrum says about the scientific citizen scientists, or whatever we're supposed to be called, it's the same rules that the scientists play under. Who wants to be wrong after I spent $100 million on research and then find out I'm on the wrong path, I'm on the wrong train track? Boy, there's a lot of ego going to be stopping me from bending the knee on that one. But I have to bend the knee. I mean, everything I tell everybody, or everything you guys tell everybody, we always say the same thing to them. You have the right to release the hounds on me if I ever claim this is a Sasquatch. It's the scientific method. You don't release the hounds on me because or the Chihuahuas, we'll say, which are people who, like, people online, well, Leon, how come you would never put your stuff on YouTube, you know, your Bigfoot stuff on YouTube, the good stuff? And I said, because you guys don't know the scientific method. Why should I argue with 300,000 people online that it's not a Sasquatch when you don't even know how to assess data to find out whether or not it is? So I'm not trying to be mean. It's not that people aren't intelligent. You drink the wrong Kool-Aid, boy, you're on the wrong path already. So, and you wouldn't know it, and you're going to react to it, and you're going to stay on that course. You know, again, ask yourself three good questions. What would you ask yourself if you were on the wrong side of history? That's what people need. You need to figure that out before the wrong side of history comes up and lays on and flap over in, like, Russia right now. How would you know you're on the right side of history? Well, you have to ask yourself five really good questions. Never give people the answers to that, because you have to come up with three good questions. How do you know you're on the right side? Hitler, sorry, we're off topic, but Hitler took the #1 country in philosophy, psychology, science, and religion, hook, line, and sinker with them. They were the #1 dispensing for all those 4 schools of thought to the world. How did he do that? Well, because he first became the authoritarian father, then he became their brother, then he went back to the father, and no one argued against the German father. You did what Dad said. And this whole idea of where we're at today has got nothing to do with politics. It's got to do with people's egos. That's what it is. Anyways, there's my rant. Sorry.
And despite everything you've heard about these sounds, Todd, they are still worth archiving.
Yes.
In the record.
Yes, 100%, including the guy who did the video who used to be into Sasquatches that did that.
Yeah, and as far as the archives go, you know, there's an album I have over there that was released in the 70s called Bigfoot Sounds.
Ooh,
and there's other sounds on there that you don't hear on the CD versions. And of course, we have Scott Nilsson, a cryptolinguist who has looked at it, but he's not a linguist. He's a cryptolinguist. So I think it's wonderful, Leon, because I was going to commission someone to have a listen to those, someone who has a true linguistic background, to look at that, because they need to hear that, because they're the specialists, and then get back to us and say yay or nay. There's language there or there's not. Because what we just saw, and I've seen that video before several times, that guy, to me, it doesn't sound quite the same. It's similar, but there's other aspects that I don't hear him doing. And that doesn't mean that the Sierra sounds are legit. It just means if you're going to replicate, then you need to replicate it and not just half-ass it. And in my opinion, he's half-assing it.
Well, he's only done it 4 times too at the time, right? That's the life of the moment. He's smoking a cigarette. He's doing it casual.
Yeah. But some people are going, okay, well, he's proved it to be fake. No, he hasn't. We need a linguist to look at it and determine whether it's actually a language. And we have to bear in mind too that there was more than just Ron Moorhead there. There was 4 other guys, if I'm not mistaken. Plus, they brought in Alan Barry, a journalist. And now, no one really saw what was making those sounds, and that's the crux. And that's the thing. If you're not seeing the vocalizer, you can't say it was Sasquatch.
It was actually Alan Barry that made the original recordings as well.
Right. So that's the thing. It wasn't just one, because Ron Moorhead gets a lot of the flack, right? Because he's one of the only remaining living people that were there, and people think that he's the one that hoaxed it. Well, Ron was sitting beside Alan Barry when they had the tape recorder running. So Ron wasn't making those sounds unless him and Alan were in on it together, duping the other 3 or 4 guys. So,
it's not the person that has to dupe them. You're not in charge of your life psychologically as much as you think you are. That's a misconception human beings unfortunately have, is they have this idea that I'm together. No, it's called emotional energy discharge. You just have to have one person in a group of people and they believe something strong enough where they have an emotional discharge. Emotional discharge is where an energy from inside the body comes into the outside environments, where we get the phrase cutting the air like a knife. And you can hijack a whole entire group. Example of that is in London, England, when they had the lions had escaped from the London Zoo. They warned the general public, stay inside. Phone us if you have any lions, see any lions. 30,000 people phoned in saying they had seen the lions. The problem is the 30,000 people weren't aware that by that time they had caught the lions that had phoned in. So how did 30,000 people see it? So when you have an emotional energy discharge, or if you're in a small group of people and one person's already hijacked the environment, remember you got 3 brains working. Your primal brain's already connected up with this person to your right, who might be a girl that's freaked out over things emotionally. That's your secondary brain that's now engaged. You haven't even figured out what's going on. All you know is you have the creeps. You walk into a room, like when I've dealt with so-called ghost hunters. You walk into a room and they're going, everyone in the room, go into that room. There's something in that room. It really freaks us all out. I go in there. Yeah, I feel like the same freaked out feeling they're feeling. But I also notice there's a fan going on in the room, an overhead fan. It's going 146 decibels. Okay, well, that's what the problem is. You're hearing that decibels affecting your nervous system. You wouldn't know that if you're not told that. It's a fan, So there's lots of stuff that can spook you when you're in the bush. And that's the thing that, I'm all about education. The idea of mind speak. I've had mind speak. I've had being zapped, all these phrases people from the Bigfoot online scene are putting on it, but they're using the wrong definitions, because clinically all those can be explained clinically with clinical terms, not with, it has anything to do with supernatural or anything. So if I don't have people around me for my best interest, like Bill, who's the Bukwas skeptic that we have here, and Thomas with the rational thinking, where I've become an alcoholic by now. If it wasn't for him, I'd probably get right out of the whole thing, to keep us kind of in balance. And this is kind of what I find is a little frustrating but refreshing when I see people like you coming up with your ideas, out of the box thinking, archiving things, not saying either way, just straight data. That works 1,000 times better for me. I'm always saying that. I'm under the same standard I put under anyone else. I don't know. Like Thomas says, even if I saw a Sasquatch right now, right in front of my place, and took a picture of it and it was blurry, it's not good enough evidence. I see the Sasquatch, though, you guys. I know, but it's blurry. So I gotta suck it up. That's fine, Leon. Good boy. Good boy, pat me on my little diaper that I'm wearing now in the hospital.
Hey, Leon, an excellent video, and I'm sure you've probably seen it and you've probably presented it. It's on Groupthink, is the video on the shuttlecraft disaster.
Right.
And that is a perfect example how one or two people within a room can dominate the outcome of a discussion. And we're talking NASA scientists that had doubts about the shuttlecraft taking off that succumbed to groupthink, and the result was the O-ring failure and the loss of those astronauts. So anybody that's interested in it, excellent video. You should be able to find it on YouTube. I think it's called An Exercise in Groupthink, the Columbia shuttlecraft disaster.
Yeah, I think there's a few that are out there that are like that.
Well, let's think about groupthink on a larger scale. I'll relate something to you that actually happened back east. I'm not sure which province it was, but it was in Canada. Newspaper writer decided to do an April Fool's joke. So he put an article in the paper saying, tomorrow the telephone company is going to blow their lines to clear all the dust and grime and everything out of the lines. The next day, but he said, so if you don't want to get anything all over your furniture, please wrap your phones in plastic or put them in a plastic bag or what have you. And fortunately, it'll only take a couple of hours or so to do. And he left it at that to see what would happen. Well, what happened was people calling the phone company asking, when are they going to blow the lines in my area? Or, I've had my bag on the phone for 4 hours. Is it safe to take the bag off now? Are you finished? And, and you couldn't explain to them, well, it's physically impossible what you're talking about. But no, I read it in the newspaper. So, this is what you're dealing with under other circumstances too.
Yeah. There was another one that happened in Seattle where a reporter claimed that there was a micro asteroid storm that hit the area that put small dents in his windshield. And within a couple of days, there was thousands of people trying to get insurance claims for their windshields due to this micro asteroid. And what it really was just over time driving, your windshield will get little pits in it.
Yeah.
And it was just all these people, because somebody mentioned now all of a sudden it jumped out and they noticed that their clear windshield actually has pits in it. So it's funny what can trigger the mind.
Well, it's even like if, say, we found a Sasquatch on the side of Trans-Canada Highway, got hit by a car or a bus or something like that. The very next week to month, you're going to have Sasquatch sightings out the yin yang. Just like UFO sightings, they're out the yin yang as soon as it hits the press. And so how do you sift through all of this data? How do you help people, like you said, Thomas? I mean, I appreciate a lot of the little nuggets of jewels that he gives you to just think clearly. Like, there's only three choices. They saw a Sasquatch, something they misidentified it as something as a Sasquatch, or they're lying. And those are the only three choices. Boy, I can handle three choices like that. I can assess whether or not a person is doing that kind of stuff. I think again, I wish in a way like we were back in those days where what was important wasn't that it was the Sasquatch, is what is it? That's what we're trying to answer. And then instead of where we're at today, with an overabundance of saturation on the YouTube channels or whatever, or especially the latest ones on TikTok. Oh my God, there's some just guys that know nothing about Sasquatch, but boy, they're just pumping out the videos, getting them, $1 million subscribers or views. I'm just thinking, none of this.
Tell me something, Todd. Do you envision a day when your collection, video collection, that is, will be indexed or even given cross-reference capabilities, if it ever got that big?
I would love for someone to ultimately take that on. It's not something that I can really do on YouTube unless I were to do it beforehand, because YouTube, you can't order your videos. Only the viewer can order newest or oldest, or like I can order it when I'm looking at my videos, but in a whole, but I can't when I'm watching them. Mm-hmm. It's that's the thing with YouTube, there's limitations. With Facebook chat groups, there's limitations. Some of those old forums like the Bigfoot forums, they're a little better organized, and easier to access and find things because they have a search function. Of course, YouTube has a search function, but to do that, it would require a delay with everything being released and then releasing it in order. Now, the problem with that too is new stuff's coming in all the time. You know, just the other day, someone reached out and said, "Hey, I've got these interviews, including one of Thomas and others. I would love for you to ultimately share them if you wish." And so they sent me the MP3 files. Another person sent me some old videotapes. So, you know, if I were to do that, I'd have to wait until I had everything that I could possibly think of and then organize it that way. But surely, when everything's up on YouTube, anyone's welcome to organize it chronically, alphabetically, you know, any way they want, chronologically.
Yeah, because it is what you are viewing as the user. Yeah.
And that's just it. You know, I've got all of John Green's stuff organized by year and by month, and of course by those who were corresponding. So that's all organized. But it's a little more difficult with videos, just because it's a little more involved. I've got videos, I don't even know the date. Mm-hmm. There was no date attached to it. It was just a program that ran sometime in the early 90s, and I can't find any reference to it online. And then I'll ask in the video description, if anyone has information, please share. Please let me know. Then I can at least put a year or a date to it in the video description.
With regard to indexing or cross-referencing or whatever, would it be possible if you did it by, getting on your own server and building a website to do it?
I had strongly considered that in the beginning, but then I realized that I don't have the skills. I'd have to hire someone to do that.
Yeah.
B, there's maintenance with something like that. C, people can crash, and there's a lot of bitter people in this field of study who would like nothing more than to have a website that's sharing information of that nature.
All good points.
Yeah, they could hit it very easily, and then there's the fee. You know, there's a fee that you have to pay to keep it and maintain it, and you're still stuck with, like, when you look at Jeff Rentz's website. He had podcasts for years. There's just so much on that website. It's hard to find anything. It's overwhelming. And that's the problem. You know, I guess it could be organized, you know, letters, photos, but then it gets really hairy, scary. Even Sasquatch Canada. There's so much information on that one. Chris Murphy's worked with Candy on that.
Yes, I love that site. Great job.
But there's so many hidden gems there, you wouldn't find them unless you really spent a lot of time. So those are the limitations with websites. So I thought to myself, well, YouTube is the new TV. It's more popular than Netflix. It's the most popular thing in the world as far as the media goes. So I thought, well, that's where you're going to get the most people viewing something. So that's why I opted for that. Websites are vulnerable. YouTube is not, at least. It doesn't seem so at this point in time. It's never had a time where it's been down for any more than an hour or so. Websites can be down for weeks or months until you get someone to fix it. So that's why I've opted just to do it strictly on YouTube.
Cool. You know, boy, I'm telling you, the time is sure flying by when you're having an interesting conversation. We're at the 2-hour mark right now. So I think we'll pack this one in for now, but this definitely requires a part 2. We can't just leave it here. There's much more to talk about. And I want to thank our guest, Todd. Please come back. Come back on a regular basis, man. We'd love to hear from you.
I would love to come back.
You take care of those jewels of Sasquatchery history there. It's that's a fascinating subject, and that makes you one of the most important sites on the internet for this media. Truly does.
Yep.
So I'll wrap it up for now then, guys. And to my co-host, pleasure as always. These are my bros here. And Todd, you have to come back again.
I would love to.
Well, folks, I hope you
Just
enjoyed
before
the
you
show.
sign off, Jerry.
Just before I sign off, Bill wants to say something.
Yeah, for the people that have been affected by the hurricane Fiona, I've got my grandmother came from Port aux Basques. I got family in Newfoundland. Jerry, you probably have family near that area.
Yep.
Just remember them. Canadians are well known for our resiliency and our generosity. So, we're always good at supporting other areas of the world when they have disasters. Please support Eastern Canada.
Very well said, Bill. Very well said. I was the Port aux Basques 10 years ago. My family's on the east coast of the island, but I do have family members in Nova Scotia too, and they got a real walloping as compared to Newfoundland. And but they're all safe and sound in my family. They've all did a safety checked in, make sure everyone was breathing and alive. And our hearts go out to you guys, definitely. And so that's it for this show, guys. And we will be having Todd back again, most definitely. So hope you enjoyed it. And until the next time. Oh, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Very important.